There are plenty of divisive things in the world of wrestling. Was Jinder Mahal a good WWE champion? Was the Attitude Era overrated? Ollie Davis has AEW bias, etc, etc. But perhaps none more divisive is this man and his star ratings. Dave Meltzer has seen more wrestling matches than everyone watching this video combined, and combined again, and as such has an opinion on the sport of wrestling that fans find interesting. For years it was just a thing. Meltzer would watch a match, he'd then write a review, and we'd talk about his star ratings. Sometimes we'd agree, sometimes we wouldn't. Then all of a sudden Bruce Pritchard started a podcast and Dave Meltzer's subjective opinions became a hotbed topic of online discourse that is usually just fart sounds being translated into tweets. How could you like this one match more than this? Well, if this was in the Tokyo Dome, etc, etc.
Look! This is wrestling! This!
With all that said, this cheeky little chappie is easily the most respected man in wrestling journalism, actual journalism, and as such, we want to go through every match that was given 5 or more stars by Mr. Meltzer in his Wrestling Observer newsletter. Before we start, no, Jey Uso vs Roman Reigns from Hell in a Cell is not on this list. Yes, it should be. No, Sasha Banks vs Bayley from that same show isn't on the list either. Yes, it should be. No, the Firefly Funhouse isn't on this list, and yes, it should be. Please do consider giving this video a thumbs up and subscribe to WrestleTalk. With that out the way, here is every 5-star or above wrestling match in 2020. Number 1, Will Ospreay vs Hiromu Takahashi, Wrestle Kingdom 14, Night 1, 5.5 stars. We kick things off as we usually do with the one night of the year, now 2 nights of the year, where we're guaranteed to have at least 2 5-star matches. New Japan's Wrestle Kingdom. Considering that 2020 has lasted around 5 Earth years, Wrestle Kingdom 14 seems like a lifetime ago, but the memory of Ospreay vs Takahashi lives on. The match was special because Ospreay had an incredible 2019 in both the Best of the Super Juniors and the G1, and Takahashi was coming back after 18 months on the shelf because of a neck injury, looking to win back the title he never lost. The two had an absolute barnstormer of a match, with Ospreay seeming hell-bent on putting Takahashi back on the injured list, but the ultimate underdog babyface came back to hit Time Bomb 2 and re-establish himself as the face of the junior heavyweight division. An incredible match and one that you should definitely go back and re-watch. Number 2, Kazuchika Okada vs Kota Ibushi, Wrestle Kingdom 14 Night 1, 5.75 stars. Just 2 matches later on the same card, and we got the second highest rated match of 2020, with Okada and Ibushi predictably tearing the house down in a match of masterful storytelling. Ibushi had won the G1, and this was his first Tokyo Dome main event, looking to not only capture the IWGP Championship, but the opportunity to face Tetsuya Naito the following night and also capture the Intercontinental Championship. The last couple of years have been building to this point, so in typical Gedo fashion, we're gonna have to wait just a little bit longer, as Okada picked up the win when Ibushi lost focus momentarily and lashed out. Ibushi is one of the best wrestlers on the planet, and Okada is no slouch, so of course this was always going to break the 5-star barrier, and it did, scoring a whopping 5.75 stars from Mr. Meltzer. Number 3, Kazuchika Okada vs Tetsuya Naito, Wrestle Kingdom 14, Night 2, 5 stars. If it hasn't been said enough on this channel or others, Gedo is a brilliant booker and storyteller, and this match was the culmination of 7 years worth of story for Tetsuya Naito. His 3rd attempt to dethrone Okada and win the title at Wrestle Kingdom. His best chance to fulfill his dream of being a dual champion. This was the bottom of the 9th for Naito. His 2019 had been plagued with depression and self-doubt, and now Naito, more than ever, needed this win. No, please, Seth Rollins, tell me more about how wrestling fans don't want or like long-term storytelling. Outdoing both of their matches from Wrestle Kingdom 8 and 12, Okada and Naito proved they are gods among wrestlers, and their chemistry is next level stuff. The two had a brilliant match to cap off a brilliant 7-year-long story. Naito put his demons to rest, capturing both the Intercontinental Championship and the coveted IWGP Heavyweight title on New Japan's biggest stage. It was spellbinding stuff. Number 4, Will Ospreay vs Zack Sabre Jr., Rev Pro High Stakes, 5 stars. Ospreay and Sabre Jr. actually had a similar match just a couple of weeks earlier in Japan, but the impact of this was doubled by the fact it happened in jolly old England. And despite his long list of accolades, Ospreay had never won the Rev Pro British Heavyweight Championship. If he was ever going to be treated seriously as a heavyweight in Japan, this would be his first step. The story between Zack and Will had been going on for years. Countless Rev Pro shows have been built around this long-standing feud, the high-flying aerial assassin and the grounding submission specialist, and they showed why this has been such a popular feud in the world of British wrestling, pulling out a 30-minute classic with Ospreay finally lifting the British Heavyweight Championship for the very first time. Number 5, Hangman Page and Kenny Omega vs the Young Bucks, AEW Revolution, 6 stars. Not only was this the highest rated match of 2020, it's the highest rated tag match in the history of the Wrestling Observer, and that covers a lot of years and a lot of matches. Some people have called it a perfect match, and I'm one of them. A perfect combination of story, drama, and spots. The tension between all four men going into it was immense. Kenny's allegiances with the Bucks, Hangman's issues with his elite stablemates that he doesn't seem eye to eye with anymore, not to mention his very rocky relationship with Kenny Omega. Couple that with incredible wrestling, including my mark-out spot of the year when Omega kicked out of the Golden Trigger at 1, and the tease of Hangman turning on Omega when the match ended. It's perfect. Call me out for AEW bias in the chat all you want. I don't care. This was perfect. You want to know how good this match was? Watch Ollie's reaction to the Omega kickout at 1.
Oh, kick out at 1!
Yes! Come on, Omega!
He pressed X for resilience.
Number 6, Best Friends vs Santana and Ortiz, AEW Dynamite, 5 stars. Due to a certain pandemic, we actually jumped forward 6 months in our timeline for our next 5-star match, and it came in the most unlikely of places. A parking lot brawl between Best Friends and Santana and Ortiz on an episode of Dynamite, a feud that started over a mum's minivan. Wrestling's weird, isn't it? Both Meltzer and Jim Ross called this the best street fight they'd ever seen, and I'm inclined to agree with them. For such a silly story, these two teams went hell for leather on each other and fought in a violent, bloody battle. People were doing sentons onto car hoods, people were hit with chains, but finally Trent was able to put Ortiz through a board on the back of a pickup truck. Perhaps not a technical work of art, but a violent one instead. The former LAX are perhaps AEW's most underutilized act. I hope we see more 5-star main event performances out of them in 2021. Number 7, Shingo Takagi vs Will Ospreay, G1 Climax 30, Day 5, 5 stars. People think that Andy Williams was talking about Christmas when he sang "It's the most wonderful time of the year," but in fact, he's actually talking about the G1 Climax, the most consistent tournament in the world that is bound to bring us classic wrestling matches. This year may not have been as impactful as the last couple, perhaps due to the lack of crowd, but it had its fair share of bangers, including this showdown between Shingo Takagi and Will Ospreay, making his 3rd appearance on this list. Ospreay and Takagi had one of the best matches of 2019 in the finals of the Best of the Super Juniors, which was a tale of strength versus speed, but now Will is a lot heavier and much beefier. He is still the more aerial of the two, but this time he managed to match Takagi in strength. This meant that Takagi had to change up his tactics, being much craftier in order to get the win, making the results between them 1 apiece, which means we're likely going to get a rubber match between them in 2021. Hey, that Gato's pretty good, isn't he? Number 8, Kota Ibushi vs Minoru Suzuki, G1 Climax 30, Day 13, 5.25 stars. Making his 2nd appearance on this list, Kota Ibushi took on the scary granddad of New Japan, Minoru Suzuki, 2 weeks after the Ospreay-Takagi match, and it blew away all expectations. Ibushi was determined to win back-to-back G1s, and in order to do that, he would have to withstand the punishment of Captain Chop and his scary chops. And punishment Ibushi took, somehow outlasting Killer Grandad and his chops of death, leaving fans with the fantastic visual of Suzuki smiling on the mat after being knocked out by the Kamigoye. Number 9, Kazuchika Okada vs Shingo Takagi, G1 Climax Day 13, 5.25 stars. Just as we tried to catch our collective breath, 2 of New Japan's best stepped into the ring to rebuild the house that Ibushi and Suzuki just tore down, so they could tear it down again. In a first time ever match, Okada and Takagi nearly went the full time limit, going 27 minutes and 45 seconds, with Takagi giving Okada his toughest test in this year's G1, making him fight for that money clip submission more than anyone else. Ultimately though, it was the money clip that did Takagi in and put a cap on easily the best night of the 2020 G1. Number 10, Walter vs. IIja Dragunov, NXT UK, 5 stars. Have you ever watched two men try to kill each other? Like, actually try to kill each other with their bare hands? Did you enjoy it? Then Walter vs. Dragunov in NXT UK might be up your alley, because these two men seemed hell-bent on actually killing each other. NXT UK is a dead brand, not helped by the fact that WWE themselves seem to forget they have it, and making shows that approximately 10 people watch on a weekly basis. But that did not stop Walter and IIja doing what they do best. And in case you didn't know what that was, it's killing each other with their bare hands. Dave Meltzer scored it 5 stars, but nearly didn't score it at all, calling it the most brutal match in WWE history, and he's not wrong. It was gritty, it was violent, it was bloody, it was real, and it was amazing. Not every match can be like this, but variety comes in packs of 8, and these two beat 8 shades of shit out of each other. Nothing has felt like this in 2020, and somehow Walter is still the United Kingdom champion, and somehow these two are stuck on NXT UK. Do better, WWE. Number 11, the Young Bucks vs FTR AEW Full Gear, 5.25 stars. Cash Wheeler once tweeted, "One day the Young Bucks will wrestle the Revival and everyone will rejoice." Well, after many, many years of teasing, they finally did do a wrestle. And we all rejoiced. In fact, some of us are still rejoicing. The build to the match wasn't AEW's best work, with FTR even telling Wrestling Daily's Louis Dangoor that they weren't happy with it. But when the bell rang, all of that went out the window. This was the story of wrestling ideologies. FTR with their old school, no flips, just fist mentality, paying homage to the teams of the 80s and early 90s, and the Young Bucks flippity-doo-dah attitude, paying homage to the teams of the late 90s and early 2000s. Those who say the Young Bucks have no psychology have either not seen this match or are just in denial. At this point, these are your only options. The match had more layers than an ogre, and it all came down to the finish where Cash Wheeler went against his own ideology and did a springboard 450, then hit the super kick with the leg they'd worked over to get the win. A perfect finish to a near perfect match. You want to know how good this match was? Watch us try and keep quiet so we don't wake up our partners during the live stream reactions to the show.
What?
Cash Wheeler.
Amazing.
And number 12, Go Shiozaki vs Takashi Sugiura, Pro Wrestling Noah Final Chronicle, 5 stars. We don't often get to talk about promotions like Pro Wrestling Noah on this channel, but when we do, thankfully, it's to talk about matches like this. Go Shiozaki has quietly become one of the best wrestlers in the world. If he was featured on a more visible promotion like New Japan Pro Wrestling, for example, odds are he would have Wrestler of the Year accolades to his name. Regardless, on December 6, 2020, he defended his GHC Heavyweight Championship against Takashi Sugiura in a 51-minute classic. This is a match you can get into even if you've never seen these two wrestle before. The story was very simple. Who can survive the other's punishment long enough to win? Shiozaki's chop sounded like they could cut down a bloody tree, and speaking of bloody, Sugiura's bloody chest seemed to back that up. Despite Sugiura trying to eliminate Shiozaki's arm to stop the chops, Shiozaki seemed to have control of the match for the most part. In the end, it was a simple clothesline that finally put Sugiura away, as Shiozaki once again proved he is the very best in Pro Wrestling Noah. So that was every match that scored 5 stars and above from this year's Wrestling Observer newsletters. Which match was your favourite? Let us know in the comments and tell us which match you felt was missed off, like Roman Reigns versus Jey Uso. Come on, Dave, that was a great match! Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to WrestleTalk for more great content like this. I've been Luke Owen, jam that jam.